Last time, on My Boyfriend's Boyfriend and Me, we landed in Pattaya, accidentally, right in the middle of a straight red light circus, and escaped daily to Jomtien, the queer refuge down the coast. That's where Michael met Nick. 21. Tiny. Beautiful. Flirtatious. The kind of boy who makes a man in a long-term relationship suddenly look 20 years younger. I watched it happen, and I even stepped back to let it unfold. Not out of weakness, because for the first time in years, I saw Michael lit up from the inside again. And strangely, seeing that, even in this way, felt good. The two of us ended the night on a bought bus, laughing like teenagers, the air warm and easy around us. But attraction has its own physics. Whatever was happening between Michael and Nick had a gravity to it, gentle, undeniable. And today, we see what happens when people start to get pulled into each other's orbit. Act 2. How gravity works. The next morning, hungover from both the beer and Asia belly, I felt like death. Emotionally, though, I felt great. I teased Michael. "Look at you, admired by all the boys." We laughed. It was banter, not a wound. It didn't feel like something more had started. It felt like the air had cleared. We went to the beach. The sand was already burning my feet, the sun too sharp for how I was feeling, everything louder and brighter than it needed to be. So I said, "I'm going back to the flat. Stay. Enjoy the sea and the sand. Just be back for 4 so we can leave on time for dinner with the guys." We kept messaging for a bit, and then he stopped. Not in a dramatic way, just nothing. Eventually I got a text at 4 p.m. "Head on without me, I'll meet you there." I got there first. Our friends were already standing outside the restaurant we were meant to go to. The heat of the day was easing off, the air softer than it had been earlier, greenery around us in a way our apartment didn't have. It felt open. Nice. They looked up when they saw me, then looked past me. "Where's Michael?" "I don't know," I said. "He said he'd meet us here?" There was a pause. Not judgment, just confusion. Lateness was normal. We're Irish, they're German. This happens every time. But me arriving on my own wasn't. I laughed it off quickly, waved it away like it was nothing, checked my phone, tried to look unconcerned. I stood there playing with my fidget toy, doing my best impression of ease. A minute later, he appeared. Big smile, energetic walk. He looked full in a way I wasn't, like his day had been busy, active, already complete. He had that cheeky grin on his face, pleased with himself, like a kid who's nicked some sweets before dinner and knows he's probably getting away with it. I said it lightly, to him and to the group. "And where were you?" "Oh," he said easily. "I met Nick on the beach. He took me for lunch, tried to feed me terrible things." As he said it, he glanced down at his phone, not the screen, the back of it, just for a second. Then he seemed to realize what he was doing and slipped it straight into his pocket. There was a small, awkward beat. "Who's Nick?" someone asked. "He's a wee local twink," I said, joking, dismissive, closing the moment before it could open into anything else. A few laughs. Conversation moved on. Inside, I quietly rearranged the story into something that sat better. They must have bumped into each other. One of those holiday coincidences. That version worked well enough, so I kept it. Earlier that afternoon, when he'd gone quiet, I'd filled the time. Hungover, I lay in bed for a bit, then cleaned the apartment, checked our online platforms, did some work. I didn't really know what else to do. Back then, I didn't yet know how to be me without him nearby. So I stayed busy and told myself the silence didn't mean anything. The restaurant we'd planned, a revolving place high up with a view of the city, wasn't happening. So we crossed the road instead to a big night market. It was packed, stalls everywhere, strings of lights overhead, everything bright and colorful, competing for attention. It felt authentic and alive in that way places like that do. Normally, I'd have loved it. That night, I couldn't really eat. Asia belly was still lingering. I poked at a chicken burger and hoped it would stay down, letting the noise and movement carry the evening. At some point, talking about the day, Michael mentioned a different beach. Not the one near us, not the one near our friends. Somewhere else. Quieter. Nicer. He said it casually, mentioned how far it was, how he'd crossed the city to get there. And that was the moment the story I'd been holding together finally gave way. There was no way to make that accidental, no matter how much I wanted it to be. I kept poking at the burger. The information landed and didn't move on. We kept talking, kept walking, kept standing under the lights. But it stayed there with me, active, the rest of the night. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask questions. We were out with friends, and back then I knew where those conversations usually led. I'd learned to pick my moments. This didn't feel like one of them. So I let it sit. I laughed where it was expected. Let the vagueness hold. We headed back to our usual spot in Jomtien. The place was loud, everyone talking over each other. Plans half made and half changed as we tried to coordinate the night. I asked him how much cash he had left and if he needed any. He said he was out, but as he slid his phone away, I noticed a single crumpled note tucked behind the case. It didn't feel like a lie yet, just a detail that hadn't found its meaning. Nick was working at a bar opposite where we sat with our friends. He was center stage now, the main dancer, spotlight body, moving like water. Between routines, he'd come off the stage and do his job, sit with patrons, rub their legs too eagerly, laugh at their jokes too loudly, take their money, showing his wares, hustling for cash. Even this had a bold, confident energy that mirrored my old Michael, slowly re-emerging. Nick was, and Michael used to be, a cheeky hustler with a grin that could get away with murder. But every time Nick had even a few seconds free, he'd run, and I mean run, across the pavement to where we were sitting, to Michael. He'd kiss him on the head gently, trail his fingers slowly down Michael's arm, ruffle his hair, giggle, then sprint back to work like a schoolboy who just dared himself to talk to his crush. The contrast was stark. With paying customers, he was big and noisy, leaning in hard. With Michael, he was softer and slower. He wasn't selling in those moments. He was choosing, and Michael, he just lit up. Next time Nick got on stage, Michael was up like a shot, skipping across to film him, cheer him on. Michael looked completely delighted, giddy. The energy between them felt like gravity, pulling them together, swinging them apart when Nick had to work, then pulling them back in again. We sat there for nearly 2 hours, me with a ginger beer, my stomach not capable of anything stronger, watching it repeat. Nick was focused on his job, properly focused, on stage with customers, attentive, deliberate, all the switches set firmly to work. Then, when he had a gap, just a sliver of one, he'd break from it. A quick run across the pavement, a few seconds beside Michael, a kiss, a hand on an arm, something murmured, then straight back again. That was it, seconds at a time, over and over. He never lingered, never tried to stretch it. He'd choose Michael, take what was available, then disappear back into the noise and the lights like it was nothing. And Michael lit up every time. What they had wasn't long enough to settle into anything. It never got a chance to land. It was just enough to sharpen the want, just enough to keep it alive, never enough to satisfy it. And I watched it thinking, this is intense, but also, This is still going to end when we leave. Because in my head, the limits of our reality were clear. There had been no real kiss as such, no secret, no betrayal. Just this bright little orbit in a bar in Yomtien, brief, unfinished, spinning faster every time they touched and were pulled apart again. A series of moments, a series of sparks. The next morning was soft, light. Michael's whole energy had changed. He was buoyant, bright, almost glowy. And I fed off it. It felt like someone had pressed a warm hand onto the center of our relationship and reminded us what it could feel like when things were new, fresh, and exciting, back when we weren't drowning in logistics and emails. Our friends we were traveling with were completely confused. They're the type who would rather just pay for a guaranteed tidy interaction. No emotional drama, no slow build, thank you very much. Just pay him and have your way with him. It was strange. I wasn't sure if they didn't see what I did because of our backgrounds or our differing values, or what seemed to become apparent later, that they viewed Nick by what he did for a living, not the person showing up with us in these brief orbits. And I was there saying to them, look at Michael, he's thriving. Because they hadn't even had a proper kiss. It was light, flirty, tender. Was it the novelty Michael was chasing? Was it his desire to be seen and desired? Was it the genuine interest of a guy who could have had anyone in the room choosing him? Or was it more simple? I wasn't sure. I was just sure of the electricity between them. It lingered on Michael like static. Attention does that. It doesn't sit still once you give it somewhere to land. And more than anything, this whole experience was validating for him. For me, there was confusion, but also calmness. Whatever this was, relationship, situationship, flirtation, it had an expiry date. It felt safe. I loved bathing in the energy that surrounded Michael that whole night. When Nick would come over, I'd turn away and chat with our friends, but gently touch Michael's leg, allowing myself the slightest entry into that moment. Reassuring Michael I was good. A small symbol of both joining him in this moment and releasing him to have it simultaneously. There was jealousy, but not of them, of the gravity between them. The next morning came. Everything moved with that familiar leaving rhythm. Bags half-zipped, passports checked twice, coffee growing cold on the counter. We finished packing our bags, got ready to head to Phuket. And as we left Pattaya, everything felt reset. Tender, playful, hopeful even. I genuinely believed this had been a small, self-contained chapter, a spark in Jomtien that had burned, done its job, and now we were moving on. In my head, Nick stayed there, under the neon, on the stage, inside that strange little coastal bubble. We would carry the good energy with us, but the boy would stay behind. That's how it felt to me. I thought that was the end of it, a lovely, unexpected moment we'd laugh about later. What I didn't know then, what I only learned much later, was that as we were leaving, Michael wasn't resetting at all. He was sitting in the airport, wondering how you get back, how you see someone like that again, how something that brief can still feel unfinished. While I was packing it away, he was already being pulled back toward it. I didn't know that yet. I couldn't. But the thing about sparks like this is, sometimes they don't go out when you leave the room. Sometimes they keep burning quietly, out of sight. And the story I thought had ended in Pattaya was already finding a way to follow us. You have been listening to My Boyfriend's Boyfriend and Me. Act 2. How Gravity Works. The beach, the neon, the electricity in the air. We thought we were leaving it all behind. Packing our bags, flying south, starting fresh in Phuket. But sparks don't disappear just because you change location. Sometimes they travel with you. And when we arrived at the villa, the quiet, the heat, the space between us settling back into something familiar, that's when I realized it. The static from Pattaya had followed us. And Michael, he was still charged. Join us for Act 3, The Static That Sticks, where a simple statement by the pool turns our quiet Phuket escape into something I was not prepared for.